Ah, extended editions that do it right. Today we're going to be talking about two films that were and are underappreciated, depending on which version you watch. Now, of course, standard trope. What is an extended edition? Well, you have a theatrical cut of a film, the one that's produced specifically for theaters, or because producers want it that way, studios demand it that way, or directors say, this is the way I want it to be done. Say, Lord of the Rings is probably a very famous example. You've got the theatrical cuts, which are all 3 hours long, 3 hours and 20 minutes for the Return of the King. And then you have the extended cut, which comes with a whole bunch of extra scenes that aren't deleted, but are purposely just left out because they're not so integral to the main narrative, but provide a lot of extra detail. They advance the world, give more character, give more depth, add an extra 30 to 40 to an hour to each individual film. Versions I watched growing up, that before I knew that the theatrical cuts existed, which I only recently watched on the 4Ks. So I now have seen both versions. It's only taken me 20 years. So that's pretty cool. It's a nice idea. Some films really need it, some films don't. Some films are so convoluted and crazy, say Batman v Superman, that they get an Ultimate Edition, or in retrospect, the Snyder Cut, which technically is an extended edition, but is really not. It's just a recut edition, because it's not an extension of what we already got, because what we already got was a piece of shit. And it does technically extend it, but it's more of a recut because it's a different vision, it's a different attitude, and everything about it. So these two extended editions that I'm talking about, Jennifer's Body, uncut. I love when they call it uncut instead. It makes it seem more graphic and violent. It really isn't. It just adds more interesting scenes. And Sucker Punch, which is technically the R18 version. I don't know why. I guess because consensual sex is R18, despite the fact that there's not even physical penetration. Good job, MPAA. Nevertheless, I have the steelbook of this extended cut because I didn't know the extended cut existed. I'd watched the theatrical cut my whole life, and I thought that was a pretty cool film. You know, in the teenage boy attributes of, wow, cool, sexy girls with guns, bang, 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 robots. Nevertheless, yeah, I know, it's a guilty pleasure, especially when I've reevaluated it and the theatrical cut is a piece of shit. However, I'd already watched the extended cut of this because I'd watched the theatrical cut once as a kid. As a teenager. I didn't care for the film. However, I rewatched it last year twice. Fuck, did I watch it twice? I think I watched it once by myself, and then I showed it to my girlfriend, and then, because she'd always wanted to watch it, and then my dad watched it. But the extended cut of both of these films, outside of giving it more of a higher rating of whatever, add really interesting and important stuff. Now, I can't recall how long this goes for in contrast, because this is only the 102-minute version, which is the extended cut, but I don't know if it comes with the theatrical cut either, because it has a deleted scenes and gag reel thing, but I don't actually know if this is the extended cut or not. It is the extended cut, I just don't know if it comes with the theatrical cut. Nevertheless, Jennifer's Body adds obvious runtime to it. So does Sucker Punch. I know this one adds 18 minutes of runtime because I watched it more recently. And the two do the right thing when it comes to extended cuts that allow you to do one thing that's very critical. Reevaluate and reappreciate the film. So Jennifer's Body, especially when it came out, suffered from critics saying like it was like too much of like dumb teenage slasher film with not enough realism and whatever to, you know, balance it. But then the extended cut adds the adults to it. Like, it literally adds their elements to the film. Like, one of the teenage boy that she kills in the forest, it shows her parents, his parents' reaction to it all, and how they're traumatized by it and all this kind of stuff. And it shows the communal, like, response to all of these murders. So it adds little scenes like that emphasize character and world building. And it's just much better. It's obviously much better. I'm not going to say that it's not better, because it clearly is. Of course, there are some extended cuts that deviate far too much and make it too much like Donnie Darko. Anyway, that's a whole different argument for a whole different day when you get to the bad versions of extended cuts. But I probably need to do more research into that outside of just Donnie Darko being the obvious exception of, that's a bad extended cut. Sucker Punch, on the other hand, is a bit different, because there's a lot of weird plot holey elements to the film, and despite the fact that even Zack Snyder himself has said that the version that is released as the extended cut of this film is not his director's cut, it's not his finalized version of the film, a version that we're probably never going to get despite this whole Snyder cut for Justice League, which, yes, again, that in itself is a superior version to the previous theatrical cut. The Sucker Punch theatrical cut is not a good film. Sure, it's showy and has some great visuals to it. It's cool to see these girls who are in a certain type of clothing killing robots and orcs and dragons and shit. I get it. It's cool. That's fun. Whatever. The extended cut still has that stuff in it, of course. The extra 18 minutes adds more to the character development between Baby Doll, our protagonist, though arguably not actually the protagonist, but the through the eyes of main character of the film. And then you have the villain as well. He actually gets more development. The main interesting aspect is the final scene that happens with Baby Doll before she gets nullified, pretty much. There's a whole, again, consensual sex scene, which, because this film has already got a lot of layers to it, if you haven't seen the film, just know that if you're going to watch it, watch the extended cut. So this will automatically spoil it what I'm about to say, but it's a very pivotal scene that, because this, fuck, it's so hard to explain how this film works, because it's like, there's a subconscious and a subconscious of this film. The regular version of the film is what you start with, where she's in this really shitty world where her abusive stepdad has killed her mum and is now, she's accidentally killed her sister because of him, and he's institutionalizing her and everything. Then, of course, in that first, 5 minutes, 10-minute sequence, she's about to get lobotomized. But just before that, she has this whole entire, daydream sequence where it's all, romanticized and kind of sexy and all this, showgirly stuff and whatever. It's still women imprisoned against their own right and whatever, but it's, got this showgirl vibe to it. But that's a fantasized version of what actually happens, because you find at the end of the film, all that stuff does happen, but she does it she's presenting it to us, the audience, in this more romanticized way to make it seem more interesting as her own escape. So she's remembering what has gotten her to this point in her own, escapist way. However, within those escapist sequences involve heists. Each heist, of course, has the more over-the-top stuff. Her fighting 3 giant samurai robot thingies. Statues, I think. I don't know what the fuck they are. The one against the dragons, the one against the World War II orcs. All those sequences are dream sequences that take place in her fantasy world, her fantasy delusion of the world, where she dances. She dances, goes into this fantasy thing of, oh my god, and it connects to, oh, you have this subplot like a mini game, like a video game, where you have to collect these tools, but you have to defeat these bad guys first, that kind of jam. It makes the film more clunky, because there's only one of these scenes that actually really relates to the film, unfortunately. It's one of those things where you use that, a good writer, would utilize these scenes to build character. The first sequence where she fights the 3 big robots dudes, she gets told what her aim is in the film, what she has to do to break the people out. And it develops her character, because it's like, hey, this is the purpose of my character. I've done something really fucked up, and to amend myself, it's to save someone's life. You take a life by accident, you save a life on purpose. That's what her arc is. But all the other scenes, with the orcs and shit, they don't, sure, they'll have brief character moments, but these will be based on what Baby Doll has seen. They won't actually implore more development between the actual characters or between the dynamics of the film. It's just, here's a cool scene while they try to get this, where obviously in the real world it's happening this other kind of way, whatever the fuck. But it doesn't really impact it other than that. It's just a dramatic representation of the heist, which you don't need to see. The extended edition adds, obviously, a lot more to it, with small scenes in between that I couldn't particularly, dictate out unless I fucking noted it down or whatever. But there are websites that tell you what the hell the differences are. But the main one, of course, is, when you get to the end of the film, Baby Doll's resolute arc is to have... it's kind of like to have find happiness. She has broken out the other girl to be free, but what's she going to do now? She has no happiness. But in this world where the guy who's about to lobotomize her, she's in this dramatized world where he's saying like, hey, you know, my whole part of this film is to lobotomize you / take your virginity. Depends on which layer of the world you're looking at. And of course, you never see the him taking the virginity part in the theatrical cut, because they cut it to make it PG-13 or whatever. And it ruined the film. It's a vital scene that completely fucks up the film. So adding that scene shows that he is a compassionate person, and he wants her to make sure that she actually enjoys it, she has pleasure and control, and that she can feel happiness from it. And she does, and that's what her fleeting moments are, her last moments are, of her being able to get this, like, empowerment and everything. They're two films that were, you know, poorly reviewed and everything. No, so many people disliked them when they first came out. They were advertised in certain ways. Again, Jennifer's Body is a sexy monster movie where Megan Fox eats people's dicks or something. And then it's like, no, it's actually like a kind of feminist empowerment movie about Amanda Seyfried fighting a fucking demon who's taking over her best friend. You know? It's like, oh, shit, okay. Not what people expected. Audience demographic for trailer is teenage boys who want to see sexy Megan Fox. Actual audience that the director wants people to watch the film is teenage girls who need empowerment. And Sucker Punch is kind of the same, to some degree of difference, because it's written and directed by a guy, Zack Snyder in particular, where it's like, the extended cut does have and emphasizes more the whole female empowerment thing, and it's definitely there. Not wholeheartedly perfect, I will admit, of course. Especially when you still can look at the film as it's still kind of made for teenage boys. But the extended cut, I actually rate above the theatrical cut. The theatrical cut, I, on my letterbox, gave it 1.5 stars. I'm like, it's a guilty pleasure. It's kind of a piece of shit film. But then I watched the extended cut 2 years later, and I'm like, I give it 3 out of 5 stars, because it's still not perfect. It's still, if it had a lot longer, and maybe had another redraft, you could have fleshed out your characters a bit better, given us some emotional weight to each character's deaths and everything, and maybe reutilized those big action scenes to emphasize character over spectacle. So you still get these great spectacle moments, but like the only character moment you get is when one of the sisters protects the other sister, and that's it. But it's like, but we already know she does that, you know? We're not gaining anything new. And yes, there's the heist element, so you can say, oh, but we learned that they get the thing. It's like, yeah, but we know that they're going to get the thing anyway. You know? That's the fucking point. So, you know, and we don't even learn how they actually get the thing half the time. But then we do. You know, they're like, oh, we got the map, and then you see the girl getting the fucking map. Maybe that's an extended cut separation where you see her breaking and getting the actual map. So it's like, what's the point of the fucking illusion if it's actually happen, if you actually see it happen? Still, it's interesting to say the least. Again, I still prefer, out of the two films, I prefer Jennifer's Body. I think it's a much better written film, much better directed, much better acted film overall, and especially the extended cut is finesse. It's perfect. Sucker Punch obviously has some more natural flaws that aren't to do with whether it was to be extended or not, because that's just how poor the writing and directing is for it. So, yeah. There's still two very interesting films doing two different, very, very different takes with the same ideal of feminist empowerment, or just female empowerment in male-dominated worlds, or just, well, yeah, kind of that. Nevertheless, very interesting films, and if I was to suggest which version of the two films I would watch, obviously go over the extended cuts. You have the uncut version for Jennifer's Body and the extended cut for Sucker Punch. With Sucker Punch, you still get all those over-the-top sexy girls with guns shooting robot stuff. But you also get the right amount of the narrative and, you know, thematic basis, so you understand what the fuck the film is trying to say, and you can enjoy it for that element too. It's still not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And of course, Jennifer's Body is just, it's just more realistic. It's just better. It's a smarter version of the movie. I hate that they cut so much of this shit out of the film. It's like, how the fuck can the studio fuck up that bad? So, yeah. Anyway, that's my video. Thanks for watching. Obviously, I can talk about other extended cuts if you want me to. I don't think I have many others to discuss, but obviously there's still the bad side of extended cuts, which I may have done a video on already. Nevertheless, see you next time. Adios.